Well, hello, everyone. And whether you're in the morning, afternoon, or evening, we're so glad to have you on our journey together in COP28 in Dubai for our daily briefing for December the 9th, 2023. It is, I suppose, day 10 in our reckoning with every single day since November the 30th, I believe, taking, plenty of lots of drama going on, lots of discussions, and but yet again, not so much any real, cemented on paper resolutions that have yet come out of COP28, despite the fact that we are almost through the middle of the second week of COP28 in Dubai. So whether that's a good thing or a bad thing depends on whether or not you're an oil advocate or not in reality, as you will see through the headlines today that have been taking place over in Dubai. As always, please let us know if there are any questions. Feel free to throw them in the chat box wherever you are watching, whether you're on Zoom or whether you are watching on Facebook or YouTube. If you have any questions, please feel free to throw them in there. We're happy to address them, happy to entertain them in our discussions, and so glad to have you on board our program today. So without further ado, let's get into the headlines. Now, it does seem like OPEC is sticking its big, fat, ugly head into COP28 as all of the delegates that OPEC has been sponsoring to attend this event, and there are quite a lot, have been panicking, supposedly, according to Reuters, about the use of fossil fuel phase-out language over time. Apparently, the COP28 president, Al Jaber, has responded positively to OPEC, trying to reassure them that they shouldn't be panicking, that fossil fuel phase-out language will not be included at COP28. However, it does seem like nations like China have pretty much come out and said, like, listen, even though we are big polluters and we are, working on our, 2050 goals, even we agree that the COP28 language at the very end of the day must include fossil fuel phase out. Just like strong, hard language at this, at the end of the resolution for COP28. In other news, there does seem to be a lot of positive energy for growers and farmers, as there has been a lot of regenerative agriculture discussions over at COP28 today, which is very encouraging. As many of you know, the agricultural industry accounts for between one quarter and a full 1/5 of all carbon emissions globally. Even in the USA, our agricultural output in terms of carbon is 12.8%. It's quite incredible, actually. So, by the way, I think I'm hearing a little bit of feedback from someone, just FYI. Yes, and interestingly also, I'm not sure if anybody on the ground is actually able to see this, but I was seeing some pictures over at COP28 of a very large smog, a lot of smog in the sky, kind of casting a little bit of a shadow on COP28. Maybe one of you on the ground might be able to elaborate a little bit further and let us know if there's actually smog in the air, as Axios has reported. However, there are still about 4 days left inside of the technical limits of COP28 in terms of daytime. We still have 4 days left before the actual fossil fuel language is accounted for, or fossil fuel language is unaccounted for at the end of the resolution. However, as what happens at most COP events, the actual negotiations may continue for a few days after the actual technical closeout of COP28, which means maybe in 4 days, coming this next Wednesday, if the actual fossil fuel phase out language is not included, there may still be hope that COP28 isn't a complete disaster. Also in the news, it does seem like maybe Bulgaria may not be hosting COP29 next year. Instead, petrostate Azerbaijan has been selected as the next place for COP29, apparently. And this is after a massive backing by Russia, according to The Guardian. So whether or not we're going to have a nice segment discussing about the considerable issue about two petrostates back-to-back hosting the COP event, we shall see. Without further ado, though, I think it is now time to hear from our soldiers on the ground. What is going on over at COP28? What sessions have you attended? What have you seen? Between Dr. John Capece and Dana Freling, we have plenty of content to discover today. So, who is first in our analysis here? Who wants to discuss what they've been seeing today?
I'll start off.
Okay.
I'll start off. Very interesting day today. As you know, the discussion has been, the theme today has been about the use of land, oceans, and forests. It's been a fascinating day, attacking those from all sides. We have this morning, I attended very interesting sessions, especially looking at the use of AI to combat climate change. We were had the privilege of listening to President Biden's assistant and climate advisor, Ali Zaidi. I had the pleasure of speaking with him privately, and he gave a very interesting address on both the perils and the promises of AI to combat climate change. We have, of course, he discussed in terms of the perils, the possibility that it can increase digital polarity and then digital poverty in terms of who has access, but also that we know how much energy data centers actually take in keeping AI running. So those are rather deleterious effects of the AI. But he highlighted the extraordinary opportunities that artificial intelligence does provide in terms of mitigating disasters, floods, droughts, forest fires because of early warning systems, monitoring different systems within the oceans. With AI is able to do it in a way coordinating with agencies and programs that we may not otherwise be able to do. As well, he spoke quite a bit about accountability, that artificial intelligence will help ensure accountability of people and help bring the workforce into the energy transition. That pairing artificial intelligence with this massive scale operation could be a huge asset to our endeavors in forwarding that energy transition. Brilliant guy. President Biden was clever to appoint him. I think he works hand in hand with the climate czar, John Kerry, who I also had the privilege of seeing speak just before I came on. I think we're going to show you a little video of him perhaps tomorrow. But this afternoon as well, we were in a large plenary discussing the forest and forest efforts, as it is key. Maintaining our forests are absolutely key to fighting the climate challenges for the entire planet. John Kerry gave an inspiring speech. We had the recipients of the first LEAF Awards, which was an initiative to bring in total reforestation and to make great strides in forest preservation. And those recipients of this prize went to Ghana and to Costa Rica. There were ministers, just about every minister of environment from Canada, Costa Rica, all over sub-Saharan Africa and South America were attending and had some profound things to say about the importance of our forests to fighting climate, not only as the lungs of the planet, but also housing the indigenous people who are really the keepers of that forest. So much more to talk about today. Another session I attended explored the unique opportunities for supplementing our protein consumption in the world through cell cultured meat. You had ministers and experts coming from different countries and talking about launching this new movement, because as we grow as a population, we will not be able to provide protein for everybody. And as most people know that the cattle industry accounts for huge amount of emissions and greenhouse gas emissions in the world, we need to moderate livestock meat production and learn to supplement it with other types of proteins. So that's a lot to bite into and chew. I'm wondering, John, was there anything you wanted to add? You probably had a totally different experience today. Or there's some interesting initiatives or talks that you heard, or something which was complementary to some of the issues that I was hearing about today?
Well, one of the things that caught my attention is what you raised about AI and digital communications in general, about it having a significant carbon footprint. When we first started coming to this event, one of the first things we did was to assess our own carbon impact of flying halfway across the world and participating in an event of this type. Interestingly, once we get here, often our carbon footprint is decreased, because in many of these, in just about every single COP host venue, host city, they've had public transportation. So when we actually get here, our carbon footprint diminishes compared to when we were in the USA. So that offsets the significant impact of the airline flight across the country. But when we talk about telecommunications, there is a great efficiency to be achieved through virtual interaction, virtual collaboration. We call it decarbonizing collaboration in Intelligentsia International and Campus Climate Corps, such that if you take, say you're going to a meeting that's an hour's drive away, and you participate for 1 or 2 hours in that event and then return, that trip, just the one-way trip, is the equivalent of 244 hours of virtual interaction. So yes, digital technologies have a significant carbon footprint, but if properly utilized, they can offset the alternative manner in which people occupy their time or engage interactively with other people in other events. So there's some benefits, definite benefits to be derived, but we definitely need to keep an eye on the digital technologies and the industries and what they consume. And you can see behind me, we're consuming a little bit of carbon right now with all of this beautiful lighting on the building behind me. It says Expo, and then on the other it says City. So this is the main entrance to the COP28 venue. Behind the camera in this direction is the entrance, and then this is like the stem of a flower going down to the end of the avenue here. And then we have the center of the flower, a big dome with an interesting light show going on there right now. And then from that center of the flower, there are 3 large petals, one directly behind the dome, and then one to our left and right. And the blue zone is in the 2 petals nearest to us. And each one of those has maybe 50 separate buildings in it where the various national and organization pavilions are. And then the petal behind the center of the flower is the green zone and areas adjacent to that petal. So it's a beautiful setting, a beautiful location, a beautiful evening here. And we thought we'd share that a little bit with you as our backdrop for tonight. Some of the sessions I attended had an interesting conversation with a gentleman in the Turkey pavilion. He's part of the agricultural industry, producing wheat. And we were discussing waste issues, wastewater and its carbon footprint for irrigation and food production. Food is a very big topic here at COP28. So I had a nice conversation about some of the challenges and issues they're facing in the country of Turkey in producing food. And Turkey produces, processes, and exports food to a large number of nations in this region of the world. I also visited the Central African Republic Pavilion, and Tolga Sengol, a former intern of mine who's here with us for this COP28 and attended the COP in Sharm el Sheikh as well. He told me that he had conversations with the folks in the Central African Republic Pavilion earlier in the day, and they talked about how they felt that they were making significant progress because their electric supply is almost entirely hydro due to dams and such. But as we know, dams are not without a carbon footprint, particularly in a region like Central Africa, where there's a lot of vegetation and therefore a lot of organic sediments that flow down the watershed and into the reservoirs and settle to the bottom. And at that location, in that position, they tend to undergo a process that generates methane. And that methane can bubble up to the surface and enter the atmosphere. Fortunately, also in a place like the Central African Republic, the water column, the water that's over the sediments, will be biologically active. So often those methanes will be released, but the microbes in the water column, before it reaches the surface, process that methane and transform it into CO2. And the CO2 load is therefore the same as it would be if those plants were decomposing on dry land. So there's a lot of different ways to look at these issues and very complicated. But the one problem stemming from climate change that the Central African Republic folks were lamenting was desertification. In other words, they are on the edge of the Sahel, the Sahara Desert, then a semi-arid region called the Sahel. And that interface, the boundary between the jungles of Central Africa and the deserts of North Africa, is pushing southward. And additional acres of Central African Republic are becoming desert land. So it's an interesting talk there. Then in another pavilion, I heard the U.S. Department of Energy Assistant Secretary for Nuclear Energy, a relatively young Assistant Secretary, former faculty member at the University of Madison, Wisconsin, talking. And she made some pretty bold statements about conflict and how it's diverting resources away from critical solutions. And I posed some questions to her. I asked why the recent agreement among nations to triple their nuclear energy capacity as a way of reducing the carbon footprint, why that goal between now and 2050 was set at tripling. Was it a limitation of what the industry felt that they could achieve by that time, or was it a government decision, or was it perhaps a decision based upon what the other nations would sign on to? And she said, she artfully dodged the essence of my question and said, well, we set tripling based upon what nuclear's contribution to the overall solution should properly be, or would reasonably be. So she was very aggressive in some of her statements on diversion of resources away from climate solutions, and then very rather conservative in her response on how much nuclear could achieve over the next, say, 30 years or less than 30 years. So it's an interesting conversation. And then she talked about resources, how much it would cost to achieve various aspects of the transition away from fossil fuels. And she was discussing how limited the funding was, relatively speaking, that we had a certain budget, the Congress would allocate a certain amount of money. And I sort of pushed back on that, pointing out, as we've discussed here before, how in a similar crisis, World War II, the United States spent 1/3 of its GDP on that war, on that struggle for survival. And translated to modern times, that would be on the order of $7 trillion a year. And of course, the United States is spending on the order of, $200 billion a year on the climate efforts. So nowhere near the tenfold trillion-dollar level that we expended in the 1940s. So good interaction. She was very forthcoming in the conversation during the session and afterwards. So I was very encouraged to see high-level U.S. agency representatives and how forthcoming they were in their comments to the audience, and then in answering questions both directed at them during the presentation and then during private conversations after the formal sessions. So good representation by the U.S. Department of Energy here at COP28.
I'm extraordinarily happy to hear that, honestly. I think in the past we've run into delegations from the US, you and me, John, and we've found that sometimes we get mixed results interacting with folks from the US pavilion, and the US agencies attending this event. So I'm extraordinarily happy to hear that the US may be stepping up a little bit, especially amid the amount of money that we spend on fossil fuel subsidies.
Got to get rid of those fossil fuel subsidies. And when I met with Kerry a few days ago, that was my one question to him. And he said, I'm going to do it. I'm going to go and get it done tomorrow. And I saw an article in the, that he was publicly said that yesterday. I was really happy to see that. He assured me that he's going to get it done soon because there's no excuse for it. I have been delighted and proud to see the representation here of the US government between John Kerry and Ali Zaidi and Rick Duke, John Kerry's deputy, the initiatives that they've taken, the money that has been pledged, the real persistence and insistence that they're going to follow through on those. Also from the private sector in the United States. I was very happy to hear about the Bezos Earth Fund. Of course, we all know who Bezos is. He's the owner of Amazon. He's giving out a lot of money, and he has decided that he's going to fulfill, his commitments through supporting climate. And he has given and has pledged to give $1 billion for conservation, $1 billion for restoration, and $1 billion for food systems. A lot of these new technologies for food systems are being funded by the Bezos Earth Fund. 500 million has gone into reforestry already. So it's been stressed again and again that governments in the global north, governments can get a little, but and can give a lot, but it's really from the private sector, from financing from the private sector. But in the global south, the governments don't have the money to really support the new systems, the new transition, to help alleviate energy poverty, to help alleviate poverty and mitigate climate change, to adapt to climate change. They don't have the funds. So those resources really must come from the private sector and from international finance. And this I've been hearing again and again and again. It's nice that U.S. entrepreneurs and gazillionaires are stepping up to, at least some of them, to give a little.
They say an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. And, these nations, these developing nations do deserve and have the right to development, to improve the standard of living of their population, of their people. Back in the 1980s, when I was a graduate student, the early 1980s, we would sit around with the other students and talk about this issue. And this was before the big boom in China. And we knew back then that what the United States should be doing, what the Western nations should be doing, was to develop then solar energy and other ways of farming, so that when these nations like China and so many of the other smaller countries, when they were ready to step up and fully engage in development, that they would have technologies that were better than the technologies by which the United States and Europe developed. And unfortunately, politics and economics did not deliver those new technologies. Therefore, China developed largely on the back of coal power plants and other old technologies, and other nations are now looking at fossil fuels because we failed as the technologically advanced nations to really allocate our human talent and our financial resources to developing the technologies and then providing them to the developing nations. And that still remains the best way that the United States can assist these countries. We need to take it on as our responsibility to really invest in research and development and then provide these new tools, not at a premium price for profit, but we need to give these new technologies to these developing nations so they can achieve the improvements in their standard of living while doing it in a sustainable and climate-friendly manner.
Well, I would take issue with some aspects of your argument, John, and we will take that offline, perhaps over dinner tonight. But it is, I am delighted to see that the United States and under the Biden administration, with his Democratic team, is really starting to move the needle and making commitments and has made huge progress in the last 3 years. It's a further reminder that everybody needs to tell everybody that's an American abroad or in the United States that we have a big job in 2024, because without continued leadership from the Democratic Party up and down the ballot, our global climate agenda is going to be under serious threat. And if the US's US's climate agenda is under threat, the entire planets are. So just a reminder there, if you're a student out there and you want to vote from abroad for the first time, go to votefromabroad.org. If you're living in one of our communities overseas in one of the 200 countries around the world, make sure you register to vote in January. You can start to register in January, participate in the primaries, make sure that you find out who the green candidates are, even within the Democratic Party, and get involved early. Tell your friends, volunteer. It takes everybody, and it's going to take everybody to make sure that we continue on a positive path to meeting our climate change challenge, our existential challenge, really.
Well, just to revisit that issue, you know, we started making some excellent progress in the 1970s. We had a president who put solar panels on the White House. We had Jimmy Carter, you know, really pushing for these new technologies. And unfortunately, we took a big right turn in the 1980s and sort of diverged from that initial path. And we're still trying to recover from that failure to really maintain the momentum that was set early on.
From the best temp president we never had, Al Gore.
Absolutely.
Yes.
It's incredible when you look at historical data, historical progress, considering that the Industrial Revolution is typically assigned to have begun close to 300 years ago, perhaps a little bit less, meaning that many nations, including the UK and the USA, who are responsible for a vast majority of the historical carbon emissions, have yet to both admit that they were the ones historically responsible for those carbon emissions, but also the failure to assign percentages of their GDP to do research, to then distribute that research to developing nations, as Dr. Capece was saying. I personally, as both a student and as a young person, I think it's vitally important that research be assigned to the correct places so that nations like the US can make up for the hundreds of years advance they have on these technological innovations and utilize that time as effectively as possible, as John was saying. However, The next segment that we have today is perhaps the one that our viewers seem to enjoy the most. I certainly do. I'm going to pass it over to our very own Michael Fidler. Michael, could you show us what's going on the ground at the COP COP conferences today? What are people saying? How many people have asked you for photos, knowing that you have a camera?
Oh, thank you for the floor, and because you said it's the favorite part of the show, I hope not to disappoint you today. Let me show you the set of the images I took today. Let me just share the screen. And here would be the first image of the day, which I just took as soon as I left the apartment, and just stepped basically in front of the house where we are staying at. I was thinking I need to go and take some images of the nature and the landscape, and hopefully also the ocean, or here it would be the Persian Gulf. But in Dubai, it's not so easy to find some nature. Obviously, we stay in the marina area, so there is the Dubai Marina walk, which is really nicely landscaped area, and you can walk along the marina for maybe 7 or 8 kilometers, and very easily can take images like that. But it's basically just parks, and that's not the nature, the way we probably imagine nature to be. Initially, I wanted to go to this place, which is called Ras Al Khor Wildlife Sanctuary. I've been there I was there maybe 6 or 7 years ago, but it was so hot today and so humid, and it was difficult to get there by bus. So I didn't go there, and I apologize. I just downloaded this image from the internet because for the Earth, I could not find the images I took there during my last visit. But I thought, well, if I cannot make it to this lake, let me see if I can find some other lake within Dubai. And there was one which I saw on the map, right, maybe 2 or 3 kilometers from where we are located. I think it's called a media city or internet city. I can't really tell right now. And it looked nice. It was so blue, and I thought this seems weird that it's so blue. And then I realized why is that. There were these gentlemen throwing some chemicals in the water. I really don't know whether it was a color or chlorine or what was that. I didn't go to ask them because they were just moving here and there. But it was some sort of a chemical making it really the color very, very artificial. So not really much nature there. Just one more thing I would like to mention. When I walk along the American University in Dubai, each and every tree had there this QR tag in front of it. I don't know whether it's for the specific tree or whether it's for the sprinkles, which have to be next to each tree. But it really got my attention that each and every single tree here has a QR code for whatever reason. Now, then I got to COP, and as I said previously, it was the Nature, Land Use and Oceans Day, and immediately someone approached me and basically gave me a ticket to go to Al Waha Theater. And that's, I think, it's the fanciest area of whole COP. I walked in and I sat down in the back because I wanted to have sort of a freedom to move around and take some images. So I basically took the second class seat, and I was approached by a very nice young gentleman who told me, "Oh, we have some space in front if you want to go there." And I went there and I got the first class tickets. I was upgraded to the first class. So I sat very, very, very close to the podium, and I had a bottle of water here and napkins there, and I don't know what else was around, and the seat was very comfortable. So really first class tickets in the Al Waha Theater. And unfortunately, well, the cameras were ready, and I was waiting who will show up because last time I went there was Bill Gates. Unfortunately, today it was not such a high level. When Dana went there in the evening, yeah, she met the high level people like John Kerry, as she just said. I wasn't so lucky. There was just a standard session. I think there were. Well, it was foreign ministers and ambassadors, but comparing to what kind of people we meet here, so unless you are a prime minister or president, we don't really consider you as a high level. But again, the Al Waha is a really nice area. It's like a 360 cinema with great sound and great images everywhere. It's a really immersive experience. So I was just taking the images from my seat, and that's something. I also had to use the translators because this is, I think, she's foreign minister from Monaco, and she spoke in French. I was just testing the translators, and yes, all of it was translated to those 5 official UN languages simultaneously. Very, very nice. Finally, I walked out and I just ran into Edward Murphy, the senator for Massachusetts. He was getting that ice cream from the Turkish guys. The Turkish guys really make a lot of noise there when they are selling the ice cream, and you can hear them everywhere. And the vendor was basically telling the senator, "Give me 5," and they were giving 5. They were just giving high five to each other. The Turkish vendors are really a showman, and I think also the senator enjoyed being treated like a regular person. But then I walked to the ocean pavilion, and I saw some very interesting technologies there. This is presentation from Ocean X, so it's not just Space X, but there is also Ocean X, and this device can go up to 6 kilometers deep in water, under the water, and get some samples from there for the scientists. Very interesting device. I saw also a lot of virtual reality in the ocean pavilion. There was at least 3 booths with some virtual reality devices. I never missed the cryosphere pavilion because there are always the scientists, and I think high-level scientists, and each and every COP I take image like that. When on one side there is the logo of the cryosphere pavilion, and on the other side there is the curve showing either emissions or rising temperature or stuff like that. I just couldn't remember whether when I took it the last time I had the logo of the cryosphere like on the left-hand side or on the right-hand side, just to make sure to stick with the standard image I take every year. I better took it from the other angle as well. Oh, there are some presentations there as well. One that caught my attention was this one in the Brazilian pavilion. It was related to Amazonia, and when you were starting the show today, you were discussing where COP29 will take place. It's still not sure, or that's my understanding, but what is sure that COP30 will be in Brazil, in Amazonia, in the city of Belém. So I think they were also doing some promotion for COP30 already. And this is kind of an embarrassing image. This is the first booth when they were having a presentation, and there was not a single person in the audience. I felt sorry for them. I wanted to go in and sit there and listen, but it was in French, and I don't speak French. I just took an image and left. And then I went to this section of the ocean pavilion, and it felt really warm and welcoming. Very sofas and soft chairs, and everybody had the blue headsets. I took a selfie with the headset, and then I just sat down in one of the super comfortable seats and was watching some documentaries there, and it felt so relaxing that it was very relaxing spending a few minutes there, or maybe I spent 15 minutes. I was about to take a nap, like the girl right next to me, because I think they were also playing the singing whales in one of the documentaries. So I was about to just take a nap there, but suddenly I woke up and decided to leave the area and went out. And once again, I ran again in the Massachusetts Marquis. He gave me the blink because he already knew that I was taking images of him with the ice cream. So he just gave me yeah, I know you are here. I took a few more images, and we just basically greet each other just with the eyes. And now, as you can see behind the center, there was the protest. And I think we will see in the news, there will be many images from the protest today, because it was big. It was large, it was pretty crowded, and as far as I remember, there was no protest last year in Egypt. This is the first protest I have seen here in Dubai. What got my attention was this pipe which says "End fossil fuels." Now And I was just searching for some the sheikhs, what they would think about this specific pipe. But I checked their expression; it was just kind of empty. It didn't make any impression on them. I suspect that they have never really experienced any sort of a protest like that in their lives. Of course, there was the UN security everywhere, making sure that it doesn't get out of hand, and there were indigenous people demanding for their rights and land, and there were also many people from Africa, or big crowd, asking for climate finance. And there were also these energizers of the crowd. They were just energizing the people. It seemed to me it was kind of mixed up, because there were the various parts of the crowd. It was just 50 meters, say, of these Africans, and there were the people from, say, Amazonia, who were doing their performance there. So it seemed to me kind of unorganized, but I don't really know who approved this or who organized that. Just so there was some shouting when I compare it to the protest I saw yesterday, which was the silent one. This was very, very, very noisy, but there were also some protesters who were just, standing there in silence and taking images like this. And if you would ask whether the protest would bring the sheikhs or the host country in the corner, if it cornered them, I would not say so. I think the protest was there, it took place, and things will not really move forward at all. Now, and I think this is the last image of the day, just give you a feel how the protest looked like. And with this being said, I'm turning it back to you, Rock, again.
Wonderful. Thanks as always, Michael. I think I speak for everyone as always when I say it's really refreshing to see what actually happens on the ground at COP28. John, I see your hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to compliment Michael again on an incredible set of images that really capture what's going on here amazingly well.
Amazing.
The blue crystals that they were tossing into the lake, those are copper sulfate. And it actually answers a question I had, because, we cross the bridge every day going from our apartment to the metro, and you look down upon the canal, and it's a little green. It's clearly got a lot of algae in it. And I was wondering about the elevated temperatures here and the urban runoff, what sort of situation they had in their water bodies, in their rivers, and their lakes, and perhaps even offshore, and how they would control the algae. And what you showed there is their control mechanism, copper sulfate. Copper sulfate will kill the algae. It also can be toxic to fish, but unfortunately, it doesn't really solve the problem. What happens is the copper sulfate will kill the algae, and all that algae just sinks to the bottom of the water body with the nutrients there still ready and waiting to feed the next algae bloom. And the copper also sinks to the bottom. So you keep adding and adding copper, and the nutrients just cycle and cycle and cycle with the algae, not really solving the problem, and simply leading to an accumulation of this copper metal in the water column, in the sediments. So I recognize that image. Very nice image.
Unfortunate, because it just means all the plant life at the bottom, potential plant life, is just going to be non-existent.
Exactly.
No oxygen's getting down there.
Right, and that's a problem in this area with the elevated temperatures also. The hotter it gets, the less oxygen is able to dissolve into the water column. And when these algae decompose, they, again, consume what little oxygen may be there in these high temperature waters, exacerbating the problem for the fish.
And I can't tell if the flower petals behind you are what's glowing and sprinkling back there. It seems like a very interesting demonstration.
Yes, that's the center of the flower. That's the center dome.
I think it's
always a great show going on.
Reminded me of Benjamin Franklin's old adage: if he couldn't tell if the sun on the back of the president of the Constitutional Convention's chair was a rising or a setting sun. And I think he had mentioned something like he was happy he thought it was a rising sun. Well, I think that with that flower there, I'm hoping that flower is yet to bloom. at these COP28 negotiations, and we'll see some fossil fuel phase out language instead of a flower about to wilt and die. Hopefully that metaphor will ring true here come the next few days. But
well again, complimenting Michael on that image, the shakes in the foreground and the pipe with the end fossil fuels now image. That's,
I mean,
that's
he
incredible.
outdid himself, didn't he?
Absolutely.
Tonight.
He knows
Just
his profession there.
And what a ideal metaphor to end on tonight, Rock, that we're hoping that this flower will bloom, because we're all waiting for the critical results of the negotiations and what kind of language is really going to come into the agreements. Abated, unabated fossil fuels, phase out, phase down, has a lot of impact.
that's right. Hopefully, maybe tomorrow's broadcast or one of the next few days, we'll hear some language regarding the phase out of fossil fuels, or at least here's hoping. All right. For everyone joining us, we're so incredibly glad to have you along for the journey of COP28 in Dubai, between the Democratic Environmental Caucus of Florida and the Democrats Abroad Coalition. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for your comments. Thank you for your considerations. And once again, as just reminding you, over the next few days, we will continue to have these daily briefings. So please still stay tuned for our coverage of COP28 in Dubai. And until then, we'll see you on the next one. Take care, everyone.